the holistic approach to security. Now, this design that we have developed, it's specifically based on how a person who is working as a cybersecurity consultant should get into an organization or should approach any cybersecurity project to understand and to ensure that all the deliverables are done properly. Okay. So to start with, the first thing that you have to do, and you have to do it very properly, is to understand the business context. Okay. The purpose of understanding the business context is that for whichever client you are going, whichever client you are evaluating, for whichever client you are working, it's very important that you clearly understand the business purpose, the scope, what are their core processes, what is the real purpose of the existence of that specific business, right? If a bank is there, what it's doing is basically providing financial services, right? So within those financial services, there will be a lot of processes on which those financial services are dependent. The bank will have some liabilities. For example, in Saudi Arabia, it will have liabilities towards SAMA. In Pakistan, it will have liabilities towards State Bank of Pakistan. So we need to understand the business context, that in what is the core purpose of the business and in what environment that business is actually executing, right? So for example, the bigger organizations, if you consider larger international banks, they are working in different countries. Okay, I know some banks which are working in Pakistan, UAE, KSA, US. So they might have one or two branches in each country. So that means that each one of them will have to obey the laws of the specific country. So if we are not considering this whole business context, any recommendation, any activity that we'll conduct thereafter will not bear any fruit. Okay. So the first thing before you start, you have a client, you have to make sure you go on the website, you understand the business. If it's not clear, try to identify the people who are working over there. From LinkedIn, you can identify the people who are working over there, and then from there, you can identify on what technologies those people are working, what kind of work those people are doing. Okay. So over time, you are going to gain the understanding about the business. Again, this also involves communicating with the people, having a good formal and informal discussions with them to understand the business. It also involves what are the future plans of business, right? In what direction the business is going to do. For example, they are trying to go to digital, but you are recommending them a paper-based form so that they can approve any hardware which is leaving the organization. So that means you are not recommending them the things aligned with their business. The second point, which is very important, is that once you have understand about the business, you have understand about the core processes, you need to identify which data is critical for them. Okay, so for an oil and gas industry or an oil and gas company, the locations of their oil rigs, the details about their capacity, all these things are critical for them. Similarly, all their information which is in the ERP, which is related to the transferring of oil from one place to another, is critical for them. If you consider about banks, their customer information, their financial information, that is critical for the banks. Okay. If you consider the telecom industry, for the telecom industry, similar is the case, the subscribers or the customers, their information is critical, but more important is the data which is transferring through their channels. Okay. Similarly, we might have companies in the health tech. So the in the healthcare, they also have a very critical information which is related to the doctor's details, the patient details, and all the medications that have been provided. So the patient history will become part of it. So all this different kind of data based on which the organization is actually providing the services, we need to identify that. Okay. Once we are able to identify the data, the second thing that we have to do is to classify the assets. Okay. So once we know that which data is critical, which data is not critical, which data is top secret, we get a very clear picture of what control should be implemented. But The controls, some controls can be implemented on the data, but not all controls are being can be implemented on data, right? The data is being collected by some assets. Okay, it might be a web application. The data is then being stored on some thing, which is the database in our cases. The data might need to be transferred. In that case, the networks is being involved. The data might need to be archived. So in that case, the mass storage devices will be used. The data need to be shared. So in that case, we need to have proper access management, and that means that all the tools which are related to access management will fall in the assets category. So it's very important that we first identify the data and then we identify all the assets and classify them based on the type of data which they are collecting, processing, transferring, or even they are deleting that data. Okay, so this is very critical. Again, normally once we start the projects, and this is the case because of the timelines, etc., most of the consultants try to get into the system and they try to get into the fourth stage without going through the first three stages. Okay, so again, it's very important that you follow this flow in order to ensure that you are understanding the organization properly, and anything that you are going to do actually brings the value to the organization. Then you have to conduct the risk assessment. Again, I'm saying that, like, if you're getting a whole project to manage the cybersecurity, then you are going to conduct it. But still, you should have a risk assessment to identify the core risks to the assets. Okay, so you already have assets classified. You know which asset is critical, which asset is non-critical. Based on that, you need to identify the risk to that assets. And inshallah, we are going to conduct some sessions on the risk assessments as well. Once we have identified the risk, we have identified the issues, we identified that what are the weaknesses, we then need to implement the controls. Now, again, the risk assessment will let us know what are the controls which are missing, what are the controls that could cause risk, what are the controls which are partially implemented. Okay, so in that case, you need to then implement the proper controls into your organization. Now, implementation of controls is where most of our activity is focused. The reason being is that we need to implement the antivirus, we need to implement the SOC solution, we need to implement DLP, data classification solutions, uh, network protection, IDS, IPS, all these activities are conducted. And again, there are a lot of different domains in which people can work within these controls. But as a consultant, you might not be mastering all the cybersecurity controls, right? You might have knowledge about some controls, but you will not have knowledge about all the controls. So how you can verify that the controls is actually implemented as desired? So your core understanding will be coming in from the data identification, asset classification, and the risk assessment. So the better risks you identify, the better you can identify that what controls should be implemented and how it should be implemented. The last point is that once you have implemented the controls, now you need to monitor your entire information security program, right? So within this monitoring, we have cybersecurity reviews, we have vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, we are making sure that our controls are working fine or not. We have security operation centers to identify any events, then check whether they are incidents. We have the threat management systems where we are identifying the latest threats, we are monitoring the latest trends. Within this, we also have the patch management system, which is making sure that all our assets are secure. We are conducting the risks assessment at periodic intervals, and our current controls are also updated or not. Okay, so this is basically a very simplified version of the whole cycle in which you should be understanding the cybersecurity controls. Now, if you identify that there's a control which is implemented for which there's no risk assessment conducted, you do not know which assets this control is protecting or which data this control is protecting, that means that your control is never going to be aligned with the business. Okay, so the better you do these steps, the more better you will have these implementations and more valuable your cybersecurity controls will be. Okay, Any questions still here? Any questions?
All good.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so this is just the last slide in which we are going to just understand that what is information security. Again, I know a lot of people will have the understanding about the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But the reason I'm repeating this from the very start is, and I will be repeating it again and again, if you consider all the top cybersecurity certifications, all of them are dependent upon these three criteria. Okay, they will be asking questions. For example, if you consider CISSP, which is considered the gold mark of cybersecurity certifications, all their questions at the end of the day are making sure that your understanding about confidentiality, integrity, and availability is clear and it's 100% correct. Okay. Why? Any control that we are going to implement will be solving one or more of the problems which are related to either confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, so again, if we are considering about information security and cyber security, like any other kind of security, we are basically trying to protect our IT or digital assets, right? And the core criteria of or the core purpose of implementing a cybersecurity function or doing something related to cybersecurity is to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the data and the assets. Okay. Now, what is confidentiality? Confidentiality is to make sure that your data cannot be accessed by unauthorized people. Okay, this is the simplest definition that I can provide. Okay, now what is the advantage of it? Like if someone who is unauthorized can access your data or can access your assets, that means they can cause damage to it, right? So in order to ensure confidentiality, we are protecting the data while it's in transit, while we are storing it by using encryption, okay, by protecting the transfer of data through the network, or by making sure that we have very strong access control so that only authorized people can access the information. Okay. The second point, which is related to integrity, is that no unauthorized person can make changes to your IT systems, your information systems, your data, or your assets, right? Again, what could be different things? We can protect the integrity of data by hashing it, by taking a digital signature of it. Also, we can ensure the integrity of data by making sure that only authorized people are accessing your information and proper processes are being implemented. For example, if we want to ensure that integrity of all the operating systems in our organization is ensured, we need to make sure that we have a very good change management system, right? If we have a very good change management system, no unauthorized person without approval can make changes to the system. Okay. Even if they are able to make any changes, those changes will be identified quickly and the issue will be solved. The third point, which is normally considered to be falling in the domain of IT, is availability. Okay. Normally, this is something which is left out, but it is very important to ensure as cybersecurity consultants that you are considering the options of availability. What is availability? That when authorized people or the people who are eligible to avail the services, they want to avail the services, they get the services. Okay. Now, what happens sometimes, for example, the website is down, right? So the people or the customers are trying to access it, but the website is down. This is an attack on the availability of the system. So how we can ensure the availability? There are a lot of different ways we can ensure the availability. Some of them is that, for example, if we have one firewall, we are going to implement two firewalls which are working in parallel. If one goes down, the other will come up, right? The other thing we can do is that we can make sure that we have proper mechanisms of taking the backup of data. Okay, we are making sure that we have the proper backup. So even if there's some attack, there's some ransomware attack, etc., we can ensure that our services are back. We can also have disaster recovery sites that if there's some attack on our primary side, we can shift all our operations to the secondary side. So these are a lot of different methods that we can follow and we can implement to ensure that our confidentiality, integrity, and availability is ensured. Why you need to have a very proper concept of this, that you need to always relate a cybersecurity control with these three, and then you need to check whether those that control is achieving confidentiality, integrity, and availability or not. If it's not, that means there's an issue in the control itself, or the control is not properly implemented. So these concepts, when you are doing anything, when you are identifying any risk, when you are conducting any cybersecurity review, you need to make sure that whatever impact, whatever issue you are identifying, at the end of the day, you should be able to relate it with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information systems.